Hello there. I had a request after last chat I did that I should talk about the plot of the film, didn't I, Hector? Before we start the chat. So I'll tell you a little bit about it. It is Jean-Luc Godard's revolutionary 1960 film Breathless about a criminal, a sort of small-time hoodlum who's obsessed with Humphrey Bogart, who has a beautiful American sort of girlfriend, acquaintance, and basically he's on the run from the law. It was very revolutionary because it included lots of jump cuts, improvised dialogue, stepping out of the film and talking to the camera, very amateurish sort of non-actors in roles. It looks like somebody just picked up a camera one day, ran out and made a film, and that had kind of never really been done before. Well, not successfully. And it's sort of revolutionized film the way punk music revolutionized music for a while. So a surprising hit at the time. This is 1960 and it has very racy scenes. And it looks like a film that was made in the late 60s. So, yes, there's not a huge amount of plot, and Andrew and I will chat about basically how we saw it in today's terms. Yes, and I want to dedicate this also to our mutual friend, Anthony Page, who is Andrew and I's mutual friend. And he's much missed, and he was a big lover of France, and he's the one who told me that a bout de souffle also means to be at the end of your tether, which is what it's usually meant to mean in regards to this film. Okay, I hope you enjoy the chat. Thanks very much. Bye. Okay, hello. Yes, we have started, so I did say that. I just said I wasn't going to say that, but I did say that. This is another one of my films from my YouTube channel that literally nobody watches. I think we got to 15 on one of them, and I consider that viral in my in my book because one of the other ones I did for the music one got zero, and I'd watched it, and I thought, do I not count? But anyway, so this is I would like to introduce you to Andrew Humphrey, who's a very good friend of mine.
Hello there.
For many years now.
We have.
And the film that we're going to be discussing is a 1960 film by Jean-Luc Godard, and it is A Bout de Souffle, or Breathless, as it's called here. Even the title is a really bad. I remember our mutual friend Tony Page told me this because I don't know why we were talking about this film, but he did mention that it doesn't literally mean breathless in French, but it also means at the end of your rope.
Yeah.
Desperate. It means desperate more
But
than.
is a bout de souffle used to mean the term breathless? It's not, is it not?
No, it's used to
All
mean.
right, okay.
It's used to mean I'm at my wit's end.
Oh, so it's not like I've run out of breath.
No.
Right, okay.
In this film, it gives a kind of because towards the end it does get very like that. So it's like, this is sort of racing, but it mainly means that you're desperate or.
Okay.
So it's not a great translation, and if you read about this film, there are a lot of times when they don't translate it properly because it's quite slangy. He's quite slangy when he talks.
But, yeah, although they slightly make a feature of that, don't they? I mean, we might talk about the dialogue in general, but they do have that kind of thing where they riff, and she will say, "Oh, qu'est-ce que c'est? What is that?" Sometimes, quite surprisingly, at one point he's looking in the newspaper at the horoscope, and she says, "Qu'est-ce que c'est horoscope?"
Yeah,
she doesn't know. That is an international word. So that's
even in France,
even in 1960, yeah. But no, for the most part, I think he throws in a bit of kind of hipster 60s slang, doesn't he? And then she asks what that means, presumably.
And she at the very last line, spoiler alert, I did this last week. I mean, it's not Miss Marple. So it's but spoiler alert, the very last scene he said he calls her a crazy bitch or something, doesn't he? He's dying.
Well, it depends. I mean, the subtitle version I watched, he called her a scumbag.
A scumbag. This is hugely discussed on
Right.
online because what he actually says is you're disgusting. You're disgusting. Oh, you make me sick. In the
Right.
terms of, but the word he actually uses means you make me sick. And then she says,
Right.
what does that mean? And then she does that sort of Bogart thing with her lips.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in the one I watched, it was some you crazy bitch, and then she said I don't know, and
Really?
then all she said was I don't know what that means. So it was, and I thought the little bit of French I do know, and I knew that word because I'd read about it, and because they're not speaking particularly fast, I thought that is completely not what she just said.
Mm.
So it was
Yeah.
really
I
odd.
mean, the actual word is dégueulasse, isn't it?
You go, laugh,
Which is like revolting, disgusting.
revolting,
Like when I mean, I briefly lived in Paris. So I've got terrible French,
yeah,
but I do remember that being quite a popular word,
yeah,
even if somebody was, I don't know, there was like some food dropped in the street and somebody be like, oh, you know,
yeah,
it was kind of used as a synonym for gross or horrible or something like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, I just actually realised that my computer isn't plugged in. So I might do a really subtle fade at that point, or just leave it in because nobody's going to watch it anyway. So, hold on a second. Sorry, you can
You never know.
This is just live television, folks. I just got a message saying, but it is plugged in. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that bit, that was kind of odd, but I thought, yeah, but if he just said like you're revolting, but crazy bitch, I mean,
That's weird
that's
because
something really different.
I mean, I knew about that ending. I had seen the film many, many, many years ago,
Yeah.
and I knew about that, the whole dégueulasse thing at the end.
Mm.
And it's not the first time the word is used. It is used at another point in the film. I
Yes.
I
Yes.
didn't write it down, and I can't remember when. I think it might be during that quite long middle scene when they're kind of like trading barbs in the bedroom.
Yeah.
I think at some point somebody says somebody else is no, wait.
Yeah. 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 I remember
Or
it.
maybe it's not
The
even
word,
there, but I think it's definitely there, and it's translated as scumbag again in there. He calls somebody a scumbag, not her.
yeah. But
Somebody is called a scumbag at some point in the film,
but yeah, I can't remember who that is now.
in
But
the translation I saw.
yeah, but it's sort of like it is a running joke, isn't it? What is it? What's that? She says "qu'est-ce que c'est"
Yeah,
every other line, and so to kind of mess with that in the translation, you're taking something away from the wordplay a little bit. I suppose it's difficult to translate.
yeah. It also was slightly annoying and not very plausible, actually, that, because
Yeah.
I know from my very, very poor school French that I had to use when I was working in Paris briefly.
Mm.
I had to really drag it up from the past. And I could remember my school French, but
Mm.
really I was much more well versed in kind of day to day slangy French.
Mm.
So it is a little bit odd because I think if we're treating it as, looking at how plausible it is, as
Mm.
an young American woman living in Paris, speaking French and mixing with French,
Mm.
she would know those words.
Yeah, there was some really, and she's supposed to be a journalist as well.
Yeah.
That didn't ring true. But I mean, when you get into the realism of the film, then you were really
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of liberties taken with realism. Well, there's a lot of stylistic things done
Mm.
that do take liberties with realism. That if you get too bogged down in that, then I think you would become obsessed with that, really.
Yeah, but like in a lot of films, there's a difference between accepting a director's purposeful world that he sets up, and then it doesn't mean you can do what you like, because then if you do something by accident or you just lazy script or something like that, that can stand out. So it's like, but I think with this, because it was his first film, and I think he just thought, I don't really care. I'm just going to break all the rules,
Yeah,
and which he certainly did. I'll tell you what, I'm going to come back to that because I'll stick with the stories. I'm just going to ask you.
But also I've remembered who else is dégueulasse in the film.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's that awful, that preposterous writer who she goes to interview.
Oh,
he says Chopin,
Chopin is the
Chopin les dégueulasses.
That's right. No,
And,
yeah, because it's too soppy or something.
and on my copy, that was translated as Chopin is a scumbag. I imagine it wasn't Chopin is a crazy bitch. On your
Isn't that weird? Because I can't remember what it said on my one, but it gave the impression that he thought it was naughty. I think it was something like nauseating, like. And I mean, I love Chopin, but it is quite sentimental. So I took it to mean that it's too soppy for him.
Oh,
and also, I think he was getting annoyed at her asking, because she asks him about, have you read Dylan Thomas' Portrait of the Artist as a Young Dog? And he's getting annoyed with her trying to engage him in intellectual conversation, and he's not that kind of person.
No, well, he's just like flirting his arse off, isn't he, with her? It's like,
yes.
Doesn't he like? What does he say? Can women? What does she say? Some quite lame kind of pre-feminist question, like, can women find their place in the world, or something? Some funny old question.
Yeah.
And he says, yes, if they have a striped dress and dark glasses. And just being.
You know what? I'm just going to say it. Probably things haven't changed that much in Paris.
No.
In Paris, it's probably the same. And all the time when he keeps touching her arse, and you kind of think, and the hashtag Me Too thing, probably the first time I saw
it. When Michelle's touching her arse.
Yeah, and lifting up her dress and trying.
Yeah, but she smacks him across the face, well deserved. Yeah.
And then he says, "But I was trying to look at your legs," and she said, "You weren't trying to look at my legs." And then he kind of. Touched it afterwards, and she doesn't seem to mind that too much.
Yeah.
But I think that's just me getting, oh my God, somebody touched another human being. That's not allowed anymore.
No, that's true. That was a funny feeling. Yeah. But it was weird for me because that was, in a way, I really liked the kind of boldness and frankness and sexiness of the dialogue, and how kind of on the nose it was really, and then making a joke about him basically. Looking at her vagina, presumably that was the joke.
Yeah.
And that I thought that landed really well, and I liked it. Whereas the actual kind of lifting of the skirt and everything, I thought it didn't really need that.
No.
For me, I thought that the dialogue was sort of so salty and so sort of surprising for its era that it kind of it carried the kind of naughtiness in itself, I thought.
And of course, the appeal of a lot of these films. Like, I think Woody Allen's spoken about his love of Bergman came from seeing Summer with Monica, which was advertised as like a dirty, Ingmar Bergman film for all those people who I think will be watching this who don't know me.
Right.
The Ingmar Bergman film, and it was sold in the States as a dirty movie.
Yeah.
Monica, this raunchy girl Monica, which he has admitted that's why he went to see it and got absolutely captivated by it. So
that was always the joke, wasn't that the source of the joke in Seinfeld as well, with Rochelle? It was like a running gag in Seinfeld about this kind of erotic European thriller, a young girl's adventures from Belgrade to Minsk or something. I've got that quote. It's something to do with Minsk.
Well, they were more liberated than the States, and I think that was a huge appeal. I'd say this is 1960, I mean, the 60s, as we know them, hadn't happened yet.
Yeah. I mean, I kept comparing it with kind of films of that time and that date in the States and British films as well. And really the only thing that slightly stylistically was similar, and in its kind of the dialogue, I thought was maybe something like Alfie. But that was quite a lot. That was when 66 or 67 or something.
66 sounds right. Yeah.
I don't know. It was certainly later anyway, and it seemed to. But that real frankness with the kind of sexy chats was quite startling, really. When she's coming back from is it after the? No, it's not after the press conference. It's after she meets the journalist who set up the press conference, and he just says, "Oh, did you screw him?" and rather than be horrified, she was like, well, we said I might screw him at some point, and she sort of really, they were firing these zingers off between each other, which I thought was great. It was actually my favorite bit of the film, that long scene. I could have actually watched the whole of that for the length of the film.
I agree with you. I was going to bring that up because that takes up, what is it, 10 minutes more, possibly more than 10 minutes of them just in that room.
Oh, it's longer. I would say a good 20 minutes.
Yeah, and it's literally, and apparently a lot of it was improvised.
Right.
the script. But it's a real mix. There's a bit of the thing jars me slightly about international films of the time. I'm saying international films because I've decided that foreign film sounds a little sexy. Foreign film.
Non-English language.
International film sounds a little more embracing. And it was the same with 8.5 because I've already watched 8.5, but I haven't filmed this with the person who's watched it yet. Absolutely loved it, but it's dubbed. I mean, a lot of these films. And I'm a lover of acting, and a lot of these films are not. The sound isn't recorded live. You can see they dubbed it on all afterwards. And there's 1 or 2 scenes in this where I can tell it wasn't. But on the whole, they're basically speaking their lines over the top, and it looks not well dubbed at times. That can be a little jarring. It
does. I mean, I went backwards and forwards because obviously it's a style that we just are not used to seeing anymore, but it was something that was just universal for a while there. And I just kept trying to think, is he trying to make a feature of this, or is it just the result of this? You know, that there's that very odd kind of coldness and detachment that is like that they both have throughout, albeit the dialogue is quite dramatic, you know, and obviously the plot that runs through it is quite dramatic as well in its way, but their responses to it, there's something very kind of deadened about that. And I wasn't sure whether that was an accident of what happens when you do the post dubbing, or was it something very conscious that he knew that would happen and, you know, they were encouraged to perform it that way. And I never quite made up my mind. I think it was like a coolness for a while there, but then it actually became quite strikingly weird, like the whole conversation about her being pregnant, which also came out of nowhere and then went nowhere. So that was a little bit peculiar, but just the way it was delivered, there was that real kind of, you could call it serenity, or just a kind of a strange coldness or detachment.
Well, her expression
it kept throwing me off.
Yeah, but it's funny. I don't whether that was sort of accidental or not, and it was quite possibly accidental because I think a lot of this film is accidental. It actually was copied a lot later. I think the one film that I think Jean-Luc Godard was actually offered to direct this film and turned it down, but you can see the film is directed very much in this style. Is Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh right, okay.
It was very influential. So, you know, I can even see it like Hard Day's Night and things like that. You know, that kind of wacky, everything's jumping all over the place.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that we sort of take for granted in films these days is really in this film for the very first time. But I think a lot of it came from they had no money. He'd never made a film before, and he was part of that whole Cahiers du Cinema group that wanted to throw out all the old rules and bring in all new rules because they were all cinema critics and movie and film lovers.
Yeah.
So a lot of it looks technically appalling, but you kind of think at the time that must have been really refreshing in the same way as a punk song would have been refreshing, because they've probably been used to years of, especially in France, costume dramas, you know, quite heavy, adult aimed. And this is a young person's film, and I can imagine young people going crazy over it because you think this is before the liberation of the 60s, and these people are just free. And
well, Godard was what? Was he like 30 or something when he made it, or younger?
He's in it. He's the guy. Do you remember the guy who tells the policeman who sees him in the news?
Oh yeah.
That's Jean-Luc Godard.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Because they all loved Hitchcock, so he's doing a Hitchcock and appearing in his own film. Yeah, I think he probably was about 30. So he probably didn't even think it was going to be successful. Apparently, Jean Paul Belmondo hated it and thought it would die a death, and thought, oh God, nobody knows what they're doing, and was absolutely amazed when he was at Cannes, you know, wow, for this. So, it's hard. I think because we've seen it, all those effects done better and slicker since. It occasionally looks really ragged, but I can imagine being a young person going to the cinema and seeing this in 1960 and thinking, wow, that's amazing.
But it does, I mean,
cool.
Yeah, it's so, but it's left me so confused though, John, because
Mm.
I think some of the things, like for example, the street scenes when people are clearly just like gawping at the crew, which is,
They're not
which
actors, are they? They're like,
no, not at all.
yeah, yeah.
And in a way that maybe I'm trying to I'm overthinking it, but then I think, well, does that mean it's more authentic, or does it mean it's more fake?
Yeah.
Because I'm not thinking, wow, this really seems to be people walking down the street and talking,
Yes.
because people are also like gawping at the camera,
Well,
which makes it even more fake. And maybe that's a tension that is just there, and something that's
well, he had all
a
this thing
feature.
about breaking the rules of cinema, but if you say that, you can get away with murder, can't you? Really?
Yeah.
And if somebody says, you do realise that your extras, in inverted commas, were all looking at the camera. You go, "Yeah, I meant to do that." It's really hard to fish out what he meant to do and what was just basically a result of him
Yeah,
not
yeah.
ever having made a film before.
Yeah, I mean, some of the things were clearly intentional, like things, like there was a couple of breaks of the fourth wall, wasn't there? There was him
Yeah.
at the beginning, because I must admit, when I was watching the beginning, I had to go back a bit because I thought I'd missed a bit. And so when he takes the car and he's driving out in the countryside, and he's actually kind of doing his own voiceover and
Yeah.
actually talking to the camera, I
Yeah.
thought, wait, did that woman actually get in the car? Is she there? Am I at her point of view? And then I had to go back, and I saw, no, she didn't get in the car.
Yeah.
So he is just doing his own kind of his own performance in the car and breaking the fourth wall, which of course she does right at the end as well.
Yeah. It almost seems like pretty much, kind of repeating myself, but like every rule, like the sort of like the shooting of the policeman is done so weirdly. He's
really
like,
weirdly.
He's somewhere, and then he just pulls a gun and shoots him, and then he dies in a bush, and he appears to be nowhere near.
It is. Yeah, not only that. I mean, all of the things that in another film would be very, very, set up and dramatic are thrown away in a really weird way, like the murder of the policeman. But also, what about that peculiar road traffic accident when that man's knocked over?
Oh yeah.
That it's just gone. It's like Michelle has a look, and he's like, okay, walks off.
But I mean, yeah, he's completely self-obsessed, isn't he, about everything, and seems completely nonchalant about the fact he's about to be arrested and that there's people recognizing him all over the place. So yeah, it's kind of hard to get into that, really.
Well, it's hard to get into
a while to get into the style of it. I suddenly thought, no, I need to keep putting myself back into somebody in the 1960s watching this and giving it. I think coming to it without giving it. Coming to a lot of these films without doing a little bit of research and trying to find out why.
I should maybe have done a little bit more. I mean, I didn't have a problem with the style, to be honest. I actually quite liked most of the style, some of it was a bit tedious to get through. Like some of the performances were a little bit, hard work, but I could have appreciated what they were doing and I think why they were doing it. I think that the thing for me that I struggled with was more the plot, and I don't just mean the kind of meandering that they did in however long it's set. What was it meant to be? One day? I couldn't quite figure it out. It was
one day,
short period.
There's ever a night time, isn't there?
I think it was kind of like the high drama of the killing of a policeman and the pursuing of somebody through the papers and on the lights going around in Paris and everything, which seemed to sit really weirdly with this kind of actually quite funny and flippant and inconsequential, almost like an Annie Hall type romance that was at the center of it as well.
Yeah.
And that was the weird tension for me. I kept forgetting that there was an overarching, quite dramatic story going on.
Yeah, you know what? I read the story and I thought, if I hadn't read that story before, I might keep forgetting that was going on. You know what I mean? I keep forgetting that he was on the run because you sort of get it set up at the beginning, and then there's a lot of scenes of him just in that room, and him without his shirt on and all this sort of thing, and it's quite engaging, but it doesn't drive the plot forward at all.
No. I mean, the plot. It was almost like the plot got in the way, really.
A little bit. And the
Yeah.
Humphrey Bogart thing, and a lot of it is probably Jean-Luc Godard. He maybe have been a Bogart fan.
Yeah.
May have. Probably if I research that, I'll find it out. Maybe he, as a kid, wanted to be Humphrey Bogart, and there's a lot of that in it. That I'm pretending to be this gangster.
Yeah.
Actually, a real killer as well. A lot of that is in Bonnie and Clyde. The sort of flippant attitude to what they're doing is very Bonnie and Clyde.
Yeah.
But
also that was very
about this romance. Really.
But that's very much about that era of films as well. If you think of how kind of Bogart and Bacall dealt with each other and how they interacted, and almost, I mean, I know it's a different kind of film, but kind of like Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy as well. They were always trading those kind of zingers that were actually a bit unkind quite a lot of the time, but obviously understood, and they had an understanding between them.
Yeah.
Although given that this seems to be a bit of a kind of a holiday fling when she was in Nice, I'm not sure they've really put in the time to realistically be able to, barb off each other like that. But I enjoyed it, and I really liked it, and that really did remind me of the earlier. It was more that and the interaction between the man and the woman, which I always really like in those old films, especially the kind of strength of people like Lauren Bacall and Katharine Hepburn. It was that really that I kind of found a bit of fun and nostalgia for old movies, rather than the kind of the actually quite boring really plot with the murder and the police looking for him, which we never really understood how and why they knew it was him. And there was something vague about fingerprints in the paper, something like that. But really, I didn't really mind in the end. I thought I was treating the plot as just like a bit of an adornment to the actual interaction between the people towards the end.
So. I think this film is incredibly unlucky in its two leads. They're incredibly photogenic, unbelievably. Jean Seberg, you can't take your eyes off her.
Oh, absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
And if she got like a Vidal Sassoon haircut like 4 years before it was invented, I mean, she looks so 60s. She looks so.
She does. Well, she looks like
Rosemary's Baby.
Exactly. She looks like Mia Farrow. Yeah, when she was married to Sinatra. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh,
but again, Rosemary's Baby was late 60s.
Late 60s. It's. Yeah. I mean, she looks. I mean, so ahead of her time.
Yeah.
And now there's a lot of story that goes with her about what happened to her afterwards and everything. But at that time, you just think, well, if I'm analysing this on a, Stanislavski Guide to Acting book, you're not very good. But you're one of those people that you just stood in front of the camera, and I can see why she became a huge star after it, because as soon as she's on the camera, you can't take your eyes off that face. I love the way. I'm sure that's a piss take as well. Like her French, and apparently she can speak fluent French.
Yeah, I think she had been living in France for a while, hadn't she?
Yeah,
I mean, she was still only in her early 20s, but
she speaks all her French like qu'est-ce que c'est? It's very with a strong American accent.
Yeah.
So she doesn't actually come over as like the world's greatest actress, but she doesn't do much, which is always wise. If you're not a great actress, just don't do anything.
Yeah. Well, Grace Kelly got decades out of it.
Exactly. Just stand there and let people think how beautiful you are.
And God knows Audrey Hepburn got even more.
Yeah. But if you're going to do something, don't crease that face, because that's what we're looking at.
Well, it's funny, because even though she's not that well-known an actress in kind of international terms, I actually knew about Jean Seberg when I was a teenager, because as it happens, I spent a year studying in America at the University of Iowa, and when I was going there, my then stepmother, who was a bit of a kind of bohemian, she really was into Jean Seberg, and she loved her backstory of being kind of like a lefty who was, ostracized by America. And she was from Iowa. She was born and raised in rural Iowa. And if I remember rightly, I think there is some sort of tribute to her at the University of Iowa, I believe. I mean, it's many, many years since I was there. but I have a feeling there was something there about her as well. Maybe there's a walk of fame or something. I may have got that wrong, but
Well, all these rumours that she was killed by the FBI, or not the FBI. Who do I mean? Do I mean the FBI? I mean basically because of her
CIA. You mean
CIA?
yeah, not FBI.
Some initials killed her. I don't remember.
Right.
Because of her links with the Black Panthers, and I think she had an affair with a long-standing affair. And this is from I did see a program on her.
She did, but she also had kind of very fragile mental health, didn't she? And
yes, but then that's really hard to. That's an interesting one because I'm moving my laptop now. Because did she or did they put a huge amount of pressure on her? I mean, that's what you know. To be a woman at that time and to be highly political, I mean, look at Jane Fonda, and to express views that nobody listens to,
yeah,
you know, you're going to be treated like you're nuts, whether you are or not.
Oh, you are, but that can make you nuts, though,
that
can't
can
it?
make you nuts. So I wonder what came first, the sort of paranoia and everything, or I mean, she was rightly paranoid probably because they were tapping her phone, and they were trying to catch her out in something. So it's hard to know what came first. I mean, I don't know how I would cope under that sort of pressure, but so it's hard to place that on her there. Do you know what I mean? Because she seems not airheady, but because it's more than that. But she just.
I think it's more detached, isn't it? There's something quite detached, which again might go back to the weird thing with the overdubbed dialogue that, I mean, presumably she was used to if she was working in French film, because that seems fairly common. Although, it is odd, and I suppose she was slightly called on to play not a stereotype exactly, but like an archetype of the American in Paris is very much a kind of archetype, isn't it?
How a French man would see an American girl, as opposed to a
New York Herald Tribune.
New
York Herald Tribune.
And I thought she's selling it. So they certainly get a load of pennies worth out of it because she's selling the Herald Tribune, and then she appears to be reporting for the Herald Tribune, and I was a bit confused.
Oh, was she also working for the Herald Tribune as well?
Yeah, was that who she was reporting from, or was she like a freelance reporter? This I kind of missed.
That's hard to say. I don't know.
But she was selling it, and then suddenly she was attending press conferences and meeting. And then,
but do you know what that suddenly just reminded me of? When I was first living in London in the 90s, do you remember there was lots and lots of free magazines that you would get like in the mornings when you were going to work?
Yes.
And they would occasionally advertise looking for people to write for them and kind of to be journalists. And I once inquired one of them, I can't remember which one it was now, and part of working for them and them asking you to write was selling the paper and handing out the paper at tube stations.
So maybe that's what that is.
So whether there's a kind of that's just a very old school way of bringing, keen young people in to work in the media, in the print media, as it was in those days.
Yeah.
I don't know. I hadn't thought about that for years and years, not for 30 odd years. Suddenly I thought about that when she was selling the paper, but she was also wanting to be a journalist. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it was another one of those kind of things. Well, you can go crazy in this film, kind of trying to say, well, that bit and what, that bit didn't kind of make sense. And I thought he set up this crazy reality, and he's basically saying, look at these fabulous people, let's just enjoy them for an hour and a half. And madcap things.
And I started to treat them like a kind of, entertaining but not entirely trustworthy friend, really.
Even when he says the big. This is a spoiler. The big when she says, "I told the police where you were," and he went, "Oh," I thought he was going to go or try and strangle her or something, and
which he'd already done earlier in the film.
I know.
He'd already tried to strangle her.
Yes, if she doesn't smile, and I thought, oh, so that's another. What in any other film would be the music would go bam, 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 and there'd be a big emotional scene. How could you portray it?
Whereas in this one we still had the kind of, what was it, the vibraphones going?
I love that music, but
I love it too, but it wasn't always entirely kind of in keeping with what was going on.
Just that same jazzy vibe all the way through it.
Yeah,
but a lot of the more lush strings, I thought, is that taken from other movies?
I meant to check because it just sounded like, you haven't got very much money, but you seem to have enough money for a 1,000-piece symphony orchestra by the sound.
Yeah.
And it seemed to be taken from Hollywood films, and also things like them going into the movie theater, and there was obviously some film noir that Jean-Luc Godard loves on, and there was this sort of reference to that as well. I mean, they were an interesting bunch. And I've tried to read some essays from Cahiers du Cinema in English, and they're so pseudo. It makes the sound look like, hello.
It's still going, isn't it? Is it still going?
I think it is still going. Yeah, I think so. No, these are old, essays written by Francois Truffaut and things like that. It's so pseudo. It's like, imagine it's not pseudo because they're genuine, but this whole kind of thing. We can take a film by I don't know they loved Hitchcock, but there are also like quite light directors,
like Roger Corman or somebody like that,
or sort of Howard Hawks, Our Docs, Our Docs. They talk about him all the time, which you kind of think, yes, very well known. Turns out really good American films, but they treat him like a god, an absolute god. Nicholas Ray, but they absolutely love him, and they talk about them as if they are like Einstein or something, and they're completely responsible for making Adolf Hitler. Sorry, I'm going to have to edit that out.
It always comes down to Adolf Hitler with you, doesn't it? Always.
Actually, no, I won't edit that out. But
any political argument I have with you, it's back. We come round to Hitler at some point.
Do you know who I was actually thinking of?
Who are you thinking of?
Alfred Hitchcock.
Okay.
AH.
All right. That's me too, but
yeah, to some people, he was as bad as that.
Oh God! But listen, there's a couple of things about the Belmondo character that I think are just, I don't know, that I didn't quite get, and that I wondered whether they're just a quirk of history that I just don't understand, in 2020. And one of them was because on the whole everybody looked so kind of stylish in a very street kind of a way. But then do you remember when he went to pick up his mail and he was wearing that horrible, huge, ill-fitting jacket?
Yes.
And the tie was all over the place.
There were a few times when they made him look really ridiculous.
The jacket didn't fit, and it was. I thought, is this like a subliminal thing that I'm meant to think he's like a little boy wearing his dad's jacket or something? Because it was massive on him.
Possibly.
So I don't know whether that was a finger pointing.
But he'd been so stylish, and then there's a sort of bit where he's sitting down talking to her, and I remember thinking he's wearing really ridiculous clothes. What that make him look really unattractive, and he's incredible looking. The nose and everything, incredible looking, and the pair of them, you can see why they were immediately snapped up, and then had film careers. Hers didn't go so well.
Although at the time, though, his looks were quite sort of controversial, weren't they? Like ugly, sexy kind of thing.
Yeah,
jolly lad that is, reasonably common now.
Yeah. The broken nose.
Yeah.
And the tan. Were tans that fashionable then? I don't think they were.
No. Well, it was Coco Chanel, wasn't it, who started that? I don't know.
Did it? Oh, right.
Yeah, she started the fashion for having a tan.
Because, previous to that, it meant that you did manual work. So
yeah, and still is in a lot of parts of the world.
Yeah, but I don't have a problem with that, personally. I like that in a person. But, yeah, so...
Do you know what was another weird detail about the Michel? Was that one of the policemen just threw it out when they were looking for him, saying he was a former Air France steward.
I know. I think that must be some sort of in-joke. I often wonder with these films, and I do remember, I might have even seen it with you, going to see an Almodovar film from his funnier periods before he was quite serious. And I think it might have been with you and Tony Page. And basically the entire audience were obviously, Spanish people living in London, were just shrieking with laughter all the way through this film. And I just, if you just read the subtitles, you just think, I don't get it. But I think there's a lot of stuff that you maybe have to be French to really pick up on. And it's really, really hard, especially in a film like that, which is full of references, full of
what they would call nowadays meta sort of,
Yeah.
are we in a film or are we in a film?
I had an experience a bit like that actually. I was in America. I was staying with friends in Chicago, and we went to see a British film that's almost forgotten now. It was almost forgotten then. Actually, I think it was. It's a Gary Oldman film called "We Think the World of You." I don't know if you ever remember that. I don't know. I don't think it's very well known. And Gary Oldman and his parents. I can't remember who plays his dad, but Liz Smith plays his mum.
Oh yeah.
And fantastic performance. And there were two of us, two British guys who were there, and a load of our American friends. And we just kept cracking up laughing just at the way Liz Smith said things.
Yes.
She just had this amazing delivery that obviously for us kind of reminded us of older women who we knew in our life. And after the film, when we were having a drink, people had actually remembered thinking, I must ask them what was funny about that line. And they were quoting the line at me and saying, why were you cracking up? And I said, it wasn't the line, it was her delivery of the line.
Yeah.
That was,
you recognise the character that makes it recognise.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of that in Almodovar that we don't get, which is why I personally appreciate the more serious ones, because that's a bit more universal. But because I'm sure there are a lot of things that are meant to be quite shocking to adults and that a younger generation would laugh at, who were buying into the whole "we're shaking up French cinema" thing. You know? I mean, even the philosophical discussion, it suddenly turns into when they're asking that guy questions, and I can't remember what they're asking him about now. It's terrible, isn't it? I should take notes like you.
Well, a lot of it was about gender, wasn't it, and about men and women.
That's right. It becomes like a fake.
He was like, only two things are important to men: women. To women, money.
Yeah. So I mean, that is a funny line, and he's also taking a piss out of the French's perceived fondness for philosophizing, about the coolness of that at that time, which came out of the 50s, where you imagine everybody sitting in the streets drinking coffee, talking about Jean Paul Belmondo, all that sort of thing. And so I think there's an awful lot of that being sent up. There's a lot of sending up in these things, and the influence of Hollywood films on younger people. And so you have to kind of enter into that world if you're going to get something of it. I mean, it's a little bit like watching a Chekhov play and sort of reading about it beforehand and knowing the circumstances that it was written in. I think if you were not interested in researching a film and you just wanted to find a good film to watch, I think you might struggle with this. I think you might give up after about 5 minutes.
Yeah, and I did as well. I mean, now we're talking about it, I realised I got a lot more out of it than I thought I did.
That was true of what we did last week as well.
Oh, really? Okay, yeah. I mean, I did find it, a bit of a snooze at times, particularly the plot. I just wanted the plot to be done, and I wanted to get back to them, really. But also at the same time, I found the two of them a bit of a snooze sometimes as well, or a little or irritating. But then people are irritating, aren't they? So,
they can be. But the little details, the little period details, like the record player, the little room. I like watching things like that.
I'll tell you what was a good period detail that I thought, gosh, how many people watching this will even understand what that means? And that's when, at the beginning, when he got his money and he got a check, he was complaining because the check, well, one, that it was a check. Who the hell would know what that is? But two, that the check was crossed.
Oh, yes.
Do you remember? So with a crossed check,
we can't alter it.
You can't sign it over to somebody else. It has to go into your bank account.
Yes.
But I'm not sure many. I mean, you and I know that because we're kind of old. But I'm not sure people of previous generations would have a clue what that meant.
No,
about cross-checked.
They wouldn't get. I think they wouldn't get a lot of it, and because I mean, it's hard to put it. It's hard to imagine seeing it coming out of the staid 1950s. I mean, it's way before a lot of those films that really broke down all the barriers. And I do think, directors that went on to be so loved internationally in the 60s and 70s basically made their mark by introducing a more liberal world to
very stuffy Western, well, they're Westerners as well, but very stuffy America and the UK, English-speaking countries, for one better phrase. You know, Fellini was doing it, and I think that to a lot of people, that's the appeal. But watching them now, it's hard to recreate that, you know, because it was very much of its time.
Yeah, I think that's my takeaway, really, that it was worth watching as a piece of sort of social history a little bit, but cinema history in particular.
Yes.
And I'm glad I've seen it.
Yes.
And especially because, actually, come to think of it, the first time I saw it was about 35 years ago in a film class at university in America, in a film class. And funnily enough, watching it now, I was thinking, okay, how do I see this influences of this has trickled down the years? And one of the things I think it influenced was the cinema actually at that time when I was watching the French cinema. So all of those kind of very kind of artificial films, but really compelling and wonderful films like Betty Blue and Diva and Subway. I mean, Christophe Lambert even looks like Belmondo. And I thought, actually, that style has kind of trickled down, that kind of laconic style and slightly detached, but with a crazy plot going on in the background.
Yeah.
That's what was going on.
The spontaneous thing definitely is in Hard Day's Night. It's definitely in a lot of British films of the 60s.
Yeah.
But they were very, influenced. The British film directors of the 1960s were very influenced by Truffaut and Bicycle Thieves and all this sort of thing. And what's his name? The one who married Ingrid Bergman. Rome Open City. They were trying to do their own version of that. It was a little like the punk movement. You know, before that they thought, I need a studio, I need millions of pounds, they found out they could buy cheap cameras and they could just go out in the street and film and make film. And it produced some really, really exciting things. Now, I don't know if it's because I'm English, but the 60s answer to that, the 60s kitchen sink dramas, whatever you want to call them, The Taste of Honeys and the Loneliness of the Long Distance Runner, I find them more enduring. I can watch them and I think they're really good. And maybe that's just because I'm English. Right?
Yeah, me too. I mean, I did have a flash at one point of, especially in that long bit that I really enjoyed in the middle, when they were in the bedroom, of Look Back in Anger, actually.
Yeah.
Both the kind of domesticity and the sort of the slight kind of hard edge to the banter.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
The other thing I thought of as well at one point, and actually when I was watching it, I thought, oh, well, that's ridiculous to think it looks a bit like that. But from what you were just saying about the influence, I got occasional flashes of early John Waters.
Yes.
Particularly
amateurism and the supporting.
So the amateurishness and the sort of the kind of pop culture of it, but also the particular scene, which reminded me of a particular scene in a John Waters film, which was when he's driving through the countryside and he's like, oh, j'aime la France beaucoup. And then he's wanting to pick up those hitchhikers and he slows down and he's like, oh no, she's fat. I don't. He's going.
No, they're ugly. Yeah.
There was something about the way that those two women were flagging down the car and him leering at them in the car that really reminded me of John Waters.
Yeah. So I mean, it really went on into the 70s. Still goes on now, like a film like Tangerine, which was all filmed on iPhones. People are still doing it.
Which one, Tangerine? Did you say?
Yeah.
I love Tangerine. I thought it was marvelous.
I've still not seen it. I'm dying to see it.
Oh, it's wonderful.
And it's all filmed on an iPhone, the whole thing.
Yeah, it is. It's filmed on several iPhones. Yeah. Oh, it's a fantastic film. I'm surprised it hasn't had more, hasn't had more currency. I mean, it was slightly ahead of its time, both kind of technically and because it was kind of about two trans women sex workers. It slightly was not ahead of its time exactly, but quite, the subject matter was probably a bit too startling when it came out, even about 5 or 6 years ago. And I think the general public would probably take it in their stride a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah, people might be keen to watch it more now. I know he's gone on to make another film which was successful as well. I didn't know he directed Tangerine as well, but I saw a film.
Yes, I can't remember either.
Yeah, but it's a little more mainstream.
Maybe people will remind us in the comments who it is.
Yeah. He's been absorbed into the mainstream, so he's not. But I like that. I like people just going out and doing stuff and trying to get round the bureaucracy that goes around. Oh, but you have to do it this way. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't know how these writers and directors cope with people changing and firing from their own project.
well, this very week that we're talking, two of the best things that I've watched in the last couple of weeks have been things that have been produced under lockdown, as we're under right now. So the staged with
incredible.
With Michael Sheen and David Tennant, and I haven't seen all of them, but I've watched a couple of the new Talking Heads as well.
Yes, I've watched a few of those as well.
Yeah.
And it's like adversity really brings out art. Do you know what I mean? They kind of say it's flourish.
It's Godardian, John.
Godardian, and they were obviously. Can you imagine living through the 1950s and all that? It would make you like that. Now it's hard to get angry about anything because we, up until this point anyway, we did have it slightly cushy, but a lot of these things are huge reactions to the awful lives that they were having to live. But this, the last question, we have covered everything, but I've kind of ignored the questions. In a very Godardian way, I threw the script away. How appropriate. But the last question I asked is, do you see why this is a classic? Which I think we've answered. I do see why it's a classic.
I do see why it's a classic. I think it's a theoretical classic, in that I think I can see why it has the position it does. I don't find it especially fun or enjoyable to watch, except the few things that I do like, I really like, but I also find a few things in it quite tiresome as well. But at the same time, that doesn't take away from its position in the history of cinema one bit. I don't think
it's a lot earlier than I thought. When I saw 1960, I went, oh my god! I thought it was a few years later than that. It seems, it could easily be 1950, probably start.
Yeah, because if you think of what people think of as, London in the 60s, they mean the late 60s.
Yeah.
They don't mean the part of the 60s when you and I were born. We were practically born, we were both born in the 60s, but it was where we both were living and grew up. It was still the 50s, really.
It was still
and the 60s didn't really start until,
my memories
well into the second half of the 60s.
In 1972. With Sweet or Bowie on Top of the Pops.
Through Starman.
I don't remember much colour before then. So it was way ahead of its time in that respect. And I think this whole thing, like, if you want to see an adult film, or if you want to see something shocking, go and see a foreign film. I can see what the appeal was there. With quite a few of the films that are coming up. I mean, we're doing Persona later, which I watched the other day. Have you ever seen?
Oh, right, okay. I haven't seen it.
Jesus Christ. I mean, sorry, Jesus, I shouldn't take your name in vain. But I'm sorry, if I was living with Ingmar Bergman and I watched that film, I'd move out, because that guy's got issues. But anyway, that's another. It's great though, but it's crazy, absolutely crazy, and very shocking in a lot of ways. Yeah. So, right, Andrew, I'm going to wrap it up. That was
good,
really good.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm taking away a really enjoyable experience, some interesting style that I can see how that's trickled down through the years. Some fun dialogue, some great images, a couple of amazing haircuts. Did you the guy taking the photographs at the press conference had this incredible head of hair? It's amazing.
Yeah, it's a very interesting look. Isn't it weird we watch these films and then somebody looks really contemporary?
Yeah,
because you kind of think, oh my god, you could be walking down the street now.
There's a great
stars.
Oh my god, amazing!
They look incredible. Star charisma oozes out of them.
While we're on that subject, off the topic, but I recommend the Instagram feed Hot Victorians, which is lots of old photos from the Victorian era of very handsome men. It's very interesting.
Do you know, because you become very familiar with your image on Zoom, and I think Hot Victorian might be my actual
I'm certainly feel quite hot at the moment, but I kind of thinking, when did I turn into Kenny Rogers? Wow. A Hot Victorians, I'll check it out. I'll definitely.
But it's your angle, dear.
I know.
If you could only see here,
now.
I know it
I
looks
know, I started
very
with a good
casual.
angle, and then I kind of reposed into the sofa.
I know it looks super casual, like I'm just talking into my laptop, but actually my laptop is about this high. It's on these two huge kind of boxes, just so there's a very, very slight down angle.
Oh, down angle. Oh, God, look. That's brilliant.
All this time.
Oh, no, but now you can see my washing, so I need to not
no,
do
but
that.
now, yeah.
And you've got a lovely view of London, and everybody's seen my washing machine.
Oh, I do.
We wash clothes. It's part of life. It would Jean-Luc Godard say, leave it in. No, do not. I want to see the washing. We want to see this. I mean, that's probably quite racist, so I may not leave that in. Can we be racist to French people? I don't know. But I think I should.
I'm not even going to go there.
I think I probably was, if we can be. All right, Andrew, thanks very much. And yes, yeah, I really liked it. Probably won't watch it again. And I think Jean Seberg is great. I might find out more about her. I think.
Yeah, the whole thing with her death and being found in the car, and they didn't find her for like nearly 2 weeks or something. It's grim. It is really grim.
It was definitely a time when movie stars couldn't have political opinions, but a lot of people getting radicalized. Yes. Anyway, we've covered all that. All right, okay. Andrew, take care. Thank you very much.
Thanks, John.
Bye now. Bye. Have I? Oh, yes. No, I haven't.
Oh, I thought that was a fake goodbye for our viewers. Sorry.
I think I instead of switching the recording off, I think I nearly tried to end the reading.
You just switched it on. We have to do the whole thing again.
Yeah, no, I've definitely.